Hey, Baruch, how you doing today?
That was good, Jeremy. You've
like
never
it?
started the show off like that.
You like it?
Take it to Broadway. That's great. Doing good. Wow. That's like
I was in a good
every
mood
week.
today. I was in a good mood. What can I say?
Every week there's something different. I make threats of jumping onto the show wearing like an ape suit or something, and you come in singing. This is awesome. Keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
I'm doing great today, and that just made my day even better. I'm super excited.
So exciting. Yeah, and today's show was just like I actually did change the title last minute because I was having a discussion with people and they were like, okay, so like this thing of being this bigger man or this bigger person in a sense and whatever, how is that any different than being a greater person?
Right.
And I was like, that's a great question because it does open us up to another topic that we have, being a bigger person, which people confuse the difference between greater person versus bigger person, you know? So very, very last minute, I decided to change the title because this one's more about being that greater person. And I think we have really an awesome guest to highlight today about that.
Oh, yeah.
So we're bringing in the none other Mr. Ari Sohn himself. There he is.
Hey guys.
Hey Ari.
Exciting.
How's it going?
Oh, good. Thank you for having me. I'm so stoked.
Thank you for joining us.
So exciting. Thank you for joining. Absolutely.
It's a good thing it's not dinner because then I would have said we're not having you, we're having chicken or whatever. So that's a bad joke I made last week. I'm going to stop doing that. Oh, man. Anyway.
It's new to me. You should have said it for me. One person is an audience.
That is true.
It is true. Yes.
It's true.
I
well,
very much agree.
Before we get into the official bio, I'm actually going to tell this story because I think I was debating where to tell it. So Ari is one of my guests, meaning that like I was the one who set this up. I met Ari and I brought him to the table. I met Ari, oh gosh, I don't know, a couple years back before COVID.
I think it was maybe like January 2020.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It was at an ed tech networking event. I was wearing my sharp blue suit with my little feather. And I walk in and we're networking and I see Ari standing there all handsome like with 2 name tags. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I go over and it says, "Where's Grandma?" So me being the smart aleck that I am and a bit morbid, and I think actually this was recent that she had passed away recently, I said, she's 6 feet under. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but you said, yeah, well, that's what I do. I help you locate her. I'm like, wait, what? So it was a nice way of like putting me on my path. And we're going to go more into what that means as us to Ari locating people that are dead. But just, I don't know, before I go into the regular bio, Ari, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, there's one thing that I've learned to be comfortable doing is to go into a crowd by myself and how to attract positive attention. So when I went to that ed tech, it was, I think, my second time going or third time going. And the first time I went, like I found myself kind of a little struggling or awkward trying to like break the ice with people, and everyone had their name tags on and you can introduce yourself like, oh, hi, Bob, or hi, Jan. And it was kind of just, we had to find these, artificial ways to start conversations.
Yeah.
But I realized after my first visit, I never really had the chance to talk about what I do without me bringing it up. And that seemed very selfish of me. So instead, I reverse engineered it to get people to talk about it without them knowing. So when I put on the 2 name tags saying, where's Grandma? I didn't have to introduce myself to anyone that night because everyone like Baruch came over to me and introduced himself to me with some witty comment or like, ha, my grandma's dead. Or like, I don't know, she died 30 years ago. I'm like, oh, like, doesn't that bother you at all? Like, do you wish you could find her? And then I got to talk about what I do with cemeteries, and it really changed the whole dynamic of all the interactions that I had. And I even got an invitation to give a marketing lecture at St. John's University.
Wow.
Because of that.
I could see that. Well, Ari, let me tell you something. You're lucky that I didn't come up to you because I'd say, hey, Grandma, how are you? That's how I would have read it. I mean,
Yeah, first name, last name, first name, middle name. Exactly.
Well, let's jump into the official bio, because I mean, it's funny because that story really sums up who you are in a way better than any written bio. But we're going to go through the bio. So our guest today is Ari Sohn, and he has over 10 years of marketing, community building, and startup experience, and is currently the director of marketing at Radial Creations, a digital ad agency in New Jersey. Additionally, he is the founder of a cemetery digitization tech startup called PreserveUS, which is where the whole "Where's Grandma" thing comes in. Alongside PreserveUS, Ari started an international not-for-profit volunteer agency called the UACD, United Agency for Cemetery Dignity, in which he has cleaned and restored over 15,000 graves and headstones. Ari has extensive appreciation for the Spanish language, Latin America. In 2018, he lived and worked in Medellin, Colombia, as the first director of the Medellin JCC.
Medellin.
I'm sorry. I should have asked you for the pronunciation of that one.
So we're in America.
That's great. Medellin. Oh, God, I'm going to get so much flack for this one. Well, okay. Very impressive bio, very impressive story, because there's like a diverse background that you've got there, from the work you're doing with the startup of the digitization of cemeteries, which, by the way, when my grandfather passed away, he passed away a year after my grandmother did. It actually was a problem locating where her burial plot was. The cemetery mixed the records.
Oh, wow.
So we were about to bury my grandfather in a place that was not actually his plot. And it was, thank God, somebody figured it out. So something like cemetery digitization, wow, that's a hard word, is extremely important. And it's similar to what you do with, the dignity of cemeteries, which short story I'll tell afterwards as to when I was in Asheville, actually by Yermi. But those two things are kind of seemingly different than marketing, but in a way they're all somehow interconnected. So can you tell us your personal experience, like your story, your journey, how you started, like where you got started with the JCC in Medellin to the digitization, the cemetery aspect, and then to now what you do with marketing, because all of it really is about being that better person, being that greater individual. So talk to us a little bit about what that journey looked like, how you did all that, and then, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So in 2017, I quit my job doing digital marketing in healthcare in New York City because I had an offer to move to Medellin, Colombia, to start a JCC there. And the year prior, the year prior, I went and volunteered to run a Passover Seder there with a few friends of mine. I met the community, and they wanted someone that could kind of bring a spark to the community and do outreach and really kind of put the Jewish community on the map in Colombia. That was a really incredible experience. And when I got back in 2018, I was unemployed, had nothing to do. And my uncle in Albany, New York, reached out to me saying, "Hey, Ari, I heard you're unemployed." I was like, "Thanks for rubbing it in." He's like, "Well, our synagogue here in Albany has a cemetery that's 170 years old, and we need someone to digitize it. I'll pay you $2 a grave. There are 5,000 graves. Do you want to come up to Albany for a few months and do this?" I'm like, "What the heck is cemetery digitization?" But I needed the money. So I was kind of skeptical, but in July of 2018, I went to Albany and I spent the next 4 months there, going up about every week, every other week. And I learned how to just take a photo, document a grave, put it up into some database in a searchable map, so the synagogue could have their own private catalog of these records and where the location of the graves were. And I was so embarrassed about what I was doing. I didn't tell my friends. I used to be this important person in South America.
Wow.
I met with diplomats. I was a community leader. Now here I am, unemployed in a cemetery at 26 years old.
Wow.
And I had no confidence what I was doing. I didn't want it to tarnish my reputation. So I kind of did this work in, in silence. But I needed the money, and I kind of, I learned to love it. So after about my second week on the job, I was walking by a row of headstones, and I found a fallen over headstone. And I asked my uncle, I called him up on the phone, like, hey, Uncle Mark, what do I do about this fallen over headstone? I can't take a picture of it. He's like, oh, you have another 5,000 graves. Just move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But something in my heart kind of just, I don't know, went off. And I said, you know what? Let me try to do the right thing. So this headstone was no larger than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, maybe weighed 20, 30 pounds. And I lifted it up and I cleaned it off, and it said Baby Jacobson 1914. And it turns out that it was the headstone of a preterm baby. Wow. And who knows how long this headstone was fallen over for. And the family probably hasn't visited that grave in who knows how long. And I felt like I kind of brought Baby Jacobson's memory back to life. And that's when something weird happened. I'm like, I got to do more of this. Wow. And for the next 2 months, I cleaned and restored every headstone that I found in the cemetery without telling my uncle, because I didn't want him to think I was wasting time doing work that he wasn't asking me to do.
Wow.
And I ran out of headstones in this cemetery. So I started breaking into other cemeteries and cleaning them up on my own. Wow. And then eventually my uncle's like, hey, Ari, I'm on to you. I know what you're doing. Thank you very much. Our community really appreciates it. And as I was doing this cemetery cleaning and I was doing this digitization, the whole time in my mind, like, I'm not a tech guy, but this software that the synagogue had me using was pretty archaic, like Windows 98 type platform. And I said, if only there was an app that did this in a sexier way, in a more like easier to understand, fluid way. Too bad I don't know how to do any of this. And I went on digitizing for another 2 months, and it was finally my last week in Albany. I was digitizing the last row of headstones, and I always wear my kippah, my Jewish head covering. And I was in the cemetery, and some car comes driving by, stops, and shouts at me, "You effing Jew," and then drove off.
Wow.
And this whole time, and something like really, really bothered me. And like, I've had instances of anti-Semitism before, but keep in mind, the only other person in the world that knew that I was doing this cleaning was my uncle, in addition to the digitization. And I said, you know what? I want to get back at this guy. Let me, show him who's boss. And I decided to record myself restoring a headstone. And what started as a little small rock covered in dirt in the ground, I ended up unearthing a 3-foot, 200-pound headstone of a woman who passed away in the 1850s.
Wow.
And I made a little time-lapse video, posted it on Facebook, not thinking any of it. And I got a few thousand views, dozens of shares.
Wow.
And this whole week happened to have been the same week as the Pittsburgh shooting. So all the more so that I really wanted to show some like Jewish pride. And lo and behold, 3 days after posting this video, I got a private message on Facebook from a gentleman from Manchester, England. And he said, "Hi, my name is Johnny. I'm really intrigued by the work you're doing. Our cemetery here in Manchester has been defaced and vandalized for so many years. Let's talk." A week later, I was sitting face to face with him at a cafe in Midtown Manhattan. Turns out he's a partner at a law firm, about 15 years older than me. And he says, "Have you ever thought about turning this into a business?" I said, "Well, actually, I have this idea of a digitization company." And he's like, "Oh, I want to work with you."
Wow.
And we went through the numbers and specifics. And in the end, I actually pushed him away twice. I didn't want to work with him. He offered 6 figures worth of funding right up front on the first time I met him. And I said, "I don't want you jumping on board just because you think you can make $1 off of doing what's right." And Johnny said, "How about this? I will quit my job at this law firm and I will put my time in so you know that I'm doing this because I believe in your mission." And I said, "Okay. And I want one other one other condition, that every cemetery that we digitize, we have to continue doing the cleanings for free. The only reason we met is because I cleaned the headstone because it was the right thing to do.
Wow.
And here we are 3 years later. Johnny's is a co-founder of PreserveUS. And what went from me being embarrassed about the work I was doing has become part of my identity. And I love it.
That's incredible.
Guys, is this not the greater person? I mean, like, is this not the, like, I'm blown away by this story, like, straight up. And I'm going to leave it to the audience to make their conclusion, but beautiful segue into the topic of what we want to talk about. Yeah. So, being that greater person.
Not only that, but there's so many lessons in business, which is, again, kind of the idea of the show. It's to help business. I mean, it's to help everybody, but business professionals are one of our main viewership. The lessons there, and just you do what needs to be done. You do it humbly, but you do what needs to be done. You do it humbly. You share it, and you attract the right people. But also, it's what you did, because after we met, I started following you on Instagram, and it inspired me to start, like, doing this as well. Like, I don't have cemeteries all over the place that I go to, but I'm not doing that, and I couldn't do it because it wasn't my thing. But when my wife and I spent that week by Yermi and Liam in North Carolina, we went to visit my wife's family. Was originally from Asheville, North Carolina. And so we went to visit some of the graves, and it was because of what I had seen you do that I now knew what to look out for. And we actually were able to discover 2 graves from the family that we hadn't known existed there, because I now knew what to look for because of watching your Instagram videos and those things. And we were able to, like, there was a tree that had fallen over, and so we were able to get in contact with the person who runs the cemetery to get them to clean it up, all because of what I had seen you do. Not because this was a business thing, but because this was, I guess, your vision, your mission. And that's, like, I think that isn't that, like, the point, first of all, of being the better person, being the greater person, is that when you are that individual, it causes others to step up and to be that individual. And when you behave in your business that way, it's going to cause others to naturally, well, it's exceptionally irresistible. When you're exceptional, you become irresistible, and it attracts people to you. That's so right.
I mean, a lawyer quit his job.
Right?
That's what it sounds like to me. That's pretty exceptionally irresistible right there. I mean,
and something that Baruch said is you attract the energy that you emit. And one thing that I want to touch on as well that Baruch mentioned is publicizing these good deeds. And I not only did I not want to share it for the 4 months. At that point, I already cleaned up like 7,000 graves, but I was worried that, like, people would think I was being egotistical about doing the right thing. Like, oh, look at me, I'm doing good deeds. But, I realized that if my actions are coming from a good place, and this could start a chain reaction of other people, then I have an obligation to share what I'm doing. And Baruch is one of countless people, dozens of people that have saw the content that we do, the work that we do, and then message me, call me, or sent pictures from a cemetery that they've cleaned up graves, or asking, how can I get involved?
Yeah.
And one thing that really led me to kind of just feel the need to do it is that no one does this.
Right.
And there are memories, there are people that were loved that once they go in the ground, people just stop caring, but their memory is still there. And a lot of times they get forgotten, and those people can't take care of themselves anymore. No one's advocating for them, but their memories are still there. And which is why, like, call me creepy or heebie-jeebie, but when I've gone to cemeteries, I've restored graves, I feel this weird presence of the souls of people that I have cleaned off their grave, or sat it back up, or repositioned it, and or digitized it and documented it. And there's just something that feels so universally wholesome about being connected to something greater than myself.
Sure.
That I just learned to get addicted to.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why in Judaism it's called, the greatest kindness you could ever do, because nobody that you helped there can ever thank you for that. Nobody can repay you for that.
Right.
So that it kind of leads into, the idea of having a moral code, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't know, maybe you phrase the question because.
No. I mean, I agree, and I wanted to expand a little bit about, what Baruch was just starting to say, and I want to kind of like take your whole story and kind of like break it into pieces, starting with the moral code. But first thing I wanted to say is that Baruch was starting to say, there's a principle in Judaism called Chesed Shel Emes, the highest level of kindness that there exists, the kindness towards somebody who's never even able to repay you. Not necessarily does it have to be dead people. We do usually refer to Chesed Shel Emes to dead people, but this is a true kindness. And how do you measure true kindness? Is when there's no way of people paying you back.
Right.
And when you and I, Ari, met through Baruch, I related to you right away because I was working in the prison system, with the same mindset, with the idea that these people may never pay me back in any kind of way, but who else is showing them, any form of human dignity in any sort of sense? So that's kind of where we connected on, where there's this high level of kindness, which is this idea of being a greater person. Now, I can only talk for myself. My moral code is what drove me. So I have a very high standard that I hold myself to, of ethical and moral codes or compasses, however you want to refer that to. But, in your own story or how you relate to it, how does that moral code play in? What's that driving force?
Well, I want to first start by saying that morals and ethics were really instilled by my parents, specifically my mother, about just honesty and not being afraid to do the right thing when no one else is. So I'm a big believer in transparency and being fair. Not that life is fair, but giving people a fair shot of respect. And I think that operating by a high standard of, which is something I strive to do, high standard of morals and ethics, it creates a certain level of dignity in what you do. And once you start living with that, that like predisposition and that expectation for yourself, your whole life changes when you're not leading with actions, but you're leading with morals. Right. And it's only helped my life for the better. And it doesn't always lead to a positive outcome, whether fiscally or physically or with relationships. But at the end of the day, I know that if I operate ethically, I can rest my head at night knowing that I did the right thing and I was the person that I want to be or trying to become.
Wow. So how does all of this connect with what first of all, what do you currently do with Radio Creations, and how does that connect with what you do now? I mean, obviously you're a marketing genius, so it makes sense that you're working in a marketing company, but how do you see, is there a connection between the cemetery work and what you're doing now with Radio Creations?
So there is. What I'm about to say has been completely hijacked and overused, but I actually love this term, and that's storytelling. Every other person on LinkedIn is a storyteller. Every influencer is a storyteller. Sure. And it gets used just like every person's an influencer these days. But when I realized that this work that I want to do with cemeteries, it has the ability to positively impact others, I had to kind of find a way to communicate that in a bite-sized, easy-to-swallow pill for the general public, because most people don't think about cemeteries day to day. I do. I'm weird like that. But you have to package it in a way that's relatable. And like having my marketing background, which is about selling something or trying to convince people that your product is best, your service is better than the rest, or that there's a certain brand that you want to establish. It's all a matter of being able to bring yourself or the service or the product to an audience that will be received in a positive way. So I see PreserveUS as having part of our mission is to preserve, protect these memories, and every person has a story. And with our platform, we actually allow people to document the story of their loved ones that have passed. And at work, day to day, with clients that I work with, I have to be able to take their brand and bring them into a room of 1,000 people and figure out that where's grandma tactic that I had with myself. And it's something that I find really challenging, but it's also it's an area that I feel I get to express my creativity in. I'm not an artist per se, but you know, I love the challenge of being able to communicate creatively. Yeah. And I think marketing really has helped me do that and take it in my startups and also in my day-to-day job.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that really connects to, to that second part of that question, that mission and that vision statement, because what ultimately you're doing, that this is what I'm interpreting, is that you are taking your moral code, you're taking, what your guiding factor, and based on that guiding factor, you are, I guess, creating or orchestrating your personal mission and vision statement, first of all, in your own life, and then by extension to the stuff that you're involved with in the work that you do.
Yeah, it's 100% true. And it's kind of selfish of me that I have imposed that personal mission to live the most meaningful life that I can, not as individual, but as part of a whole. But I mean, when I saw that first headstone, no one ever taught me, oh, if you see a fallen over headstone, go clean it up, go pick it up. Right. People said, oh, if you see a granny trying to cross the street, help her cross the street. We all learned that.
Right.
But I looked at this fallen over headstone like, this isn't right. And no one's doing this. I can't call anyone. So where does that leave me? And I personally believe in a lot of personal responsibility. It's like, well, if I leave this fallen over headstone, I can either be the person to bring that positive change into the world that I want to see and be an active participant in that positive change.
Right.
Or I could walk away and claim that's not my responsibility, but then be negatively contributing to a world that I don't think is fulfilling its full potential of dignity and honor and respect. So, and I learned that you don't have to be special to make a big difference. And I only started with one headstone. Now I've restored over 15,000 and digitized thousands on top of that. And I was just a regular guy. I was unemployed. It's not like I had any training for this. Right. I literally took tools. I took some tools from my parents' broken fireplace. I took their broom, this like wood pick, a dustpan, plastic gloves, garbage bags, and I just saw the change. I was the change I wanted to see, and it really grew. And I've restored and digitized graves all up the east coast of the United States, from Florida up to Vermont and Colombia and Israel as well.
Wow.
There's another business lesson right there. It's don't wait till you have the right tools to get started. Just get started, grab what you can and get going. But I love what you're saying. Like I could be wrong, but it sounds like what you've done, what you did, because you started off in marketing, if I remember correctly, right? And I want to say Colombia, but the way you said it was so much more beautiful.
Colombia.
Yeah, Colombia. There you go. Right. You started there, and then you built up the JCC, and then you like shifted almost entirely to something completely random. But that, it seems like that led to your current employment.
And it's the crazy thing is it's random at face value, but it's all interconnected. I mean, in Colombia, I had an obligation. I was in charge of a community of 75, 100 people every day, and I was 25 when I moved there. I was kind of thrown into that. And the only difference is that when I got back to do PreserveUS, I went from caring for living people to dead people. But then on top of that, it's also the living members of those who passed. So and it's all about working for something more than myself. And I just would feel selfish otherwise. And having that, being part of a community is something that has brought a lot of like emotional security to my life and also a sense of fulfillment.
Right. Wow.
Sure. We actually have here in the comments, Gracie's asking a very interesting question, which I had the similar question before. I'll bring it up here onto the screen.
Yes.
Where once it's digitized, can people search for it online? And could you expand a little bit more about the vision, I guess, of the program?
So, Gracie, thank you so much for your question. To briefly describe the PreserveUS app, is we are Google Maps for headstones. So just like someone could go into Google Maps and type in CVS near me or a Starbucks near me, and all the locations populate on the map, you could click on that location and photos pop up and you can get reviews and you can get directions. It's the same thing, but instead of searching for CVS, you can search for Charlene Williams, and the Charlene Williams that we've digitized populate in the map.
Wow. And
if we digitize it and we have all the records there and we have the photos, then you can search all the relevant information. So the first names, last name, relevant dates, photos, and even there's an ancestry component where you can find out about their family tree and who their siblings were, who their parents were, where they worked, were they a veteran, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've far from digitized every grave out there, and there are other platforms that have cemetery records online. Done is made it these records more accessible, and there's a more quality. We have like a higher barometer for quality of what information is shared. Some of these posts, there's no checks and balances. People could just post information about a grave. I could go out and say, oh, this is George Washington's grave in, Malibu, California. And I could post it. And I could post a picture of a cheeseburger, but that could be George Washington's grave. So we wanted to bring cemetery digitization to the 21st modern technology era. We're not the first, but we are striving to be the best.
Nice. Yeah, so this is also part of the show where, we are inviting our audience to continue the discussion. As you all know, tomorrow on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a Clubhouse. So for those of you who are following our journey, the Exceptionally Irresistible Journey, we are on Apple and Spotify, that's where we were this morning. Barak and I had this discussion. It was a great discussion. We spoke all about being this greater person. And Barak was just so kind enough to introduce us to Ari Sohn today. And guys, if you guys have not gathered by now how incredible this individual is, wake up and smell the coffee. Sorry for the directness there. But we believe that everybody has this ability and this greater person within them. So tomorrow, please join us on the Clubhouse. We would love to hear you talk to us about what your inputs are, your feedback, your thoughts. This is the time for you to shine. So that is just a PSA that we always do in the middle of our show. So we're inviting you all to the Clubhouse to talk about, something greater, something bigger than. And then I just want to shift it towards the end of our show, talking to Ari about, this whole idea that, you seem to have had a difficulty in life. All of a sudden there was some kind of calling, whether it be divine or your uncle picking up the phone and saying, hey, come do this thing. And you seem to just be willing and move forward and do it. That to me indicates, being a person, or the expression as it goes, being a man where there's no other man, just when you're called to service, identifying that this is perhaps some kind of call or something. So what would be your lesson that, when life gets tough or whatever the situation is, move forward? Because that's the lesson I'm learning from your story. What would be your message to everybody else?
So there are two main things that I have found myself being rooted in and grounded in when it comes to when life gets tough. Actually three things. Number one is look for something with meaning for your own selfish purposes. When you can get that and you can find a little meaning for yourself, it will encourage you to chase more. It will inspire you to take action. Then the second thing is, when you get to that point where you're ready to take action, start small. A lot of people have these grand expectations that if they're not, they don't have $1 million business overnight, or they haven't changed the world in a day, then it's a failure. And there's actually I heard some metaphor story. There's a really great book called Wisdom from the Bat Cave by Rabbi Dr. Carey Friedman. He is a former professor at Duke University, and he kind of spiritually breaks down Batman, Wisdom from the Bat Cave. It's incredible. Wow. And he talks about this metaphor of a man walking on the beach, and he sees someone throwing a starfish from that washed up on shore into the ocean. But there are thousands of starfish. And he went over to him and said, "Why are you doing this? You're never going to finish throwing all the starfish back into the sea." And he says, "True, but at least I put one back." And that's kind of the mentality that I've tried to adopt for myself, which is not like, it's okay to want to achieve perfection, as digitizing every grave in the world and preserving every memory, preserving all of us, preserve us. But if you get inspired by just doing one headstone, one starfish, then that's okay. And that will keep you motivated for a very long time. The last thing is, once you have your motivation, you start small. If you can throw in and combine that with those actions for somebody else, doing things for somebody else, it changes your life. Right. Because a lot of times people are unhappy because they don't feel they have that's their own. They feel insufficient. But when you give to somebody that doesn't have something, you're proving to yourself that I have something that somebody else doesn't have, and what I have to give is valuable, and it's wanted, and it's needed, and it's appreciated. And when you can start operating through the mindset of, yeah, I have the selfish motivation to find meaning, but you package it with for others, it creates this beautiful harmony of you want to wake up and just try to help people. You want to be that person that when you see someone walking down the street, or you see a cashier at a supermarket and their face is down, you ask them how you're doing. You put a smile on your face when you see someone that use a smile. All these cliches that people talk about, they're so powerful. People have the ability to change the trajectory of somebody's day just by giving the little bit that you have to somebody else. And like I said, I'm addicted to it. I love it.
Very evident. So true.
I've got nothing else. Of course I got 1,000 more questions, but.
Well, I actually just want to say one thing, and this is reminding me of the work of happiness that Baruch and I, we do. We have this workshop once a month now, where we invite people to join us on a 3-hour journey. It's an incredible workshop. It's gotten rave reviews from everybody who's taken it so far. But one of the things we talk about over there, which is one of the 5 steps that is in that workshop, is that inspiration component. And the reason why that inspiration component is so important is exactly a testament to what you're saying there. We do make a difference between inspiration and motivation, which is the most common misunderstanding that most people have. They confuse them very often. Motivation is where motivation runs out at some point. You do get tired of something, and some people, they lack motivation. But what you were demonstrating, and part of your story, is that inspiration component, where it is so much more inspiring to wake up in the morning and saying, I could make such a significant difference in the world, not just for me, but something greater than myself, and being able to give it over and do this thing for somebody else. And that's a testament to exactly what you're saying. Like, it makes it just, I go to sleep happy, I wake up happy, I'm living this happy life, this fulfilled life, this really meaningful, and I guess even rich life. Like, just this entire interview was just a blowing away interview. Thank you so much for it being an unbelievable time. I mean, we covered so much in 40 minutes. It's crazy. But it's so evident from the way you're talking that you are an extremely fulfilled individual. And just your story is such an inspirational story. I mean, like, I literally cannot say it in any other way.
Thank you. That means a lot. I would say that it's been a journey, and I'm not any more special than anybody else, and everyone has their hardships and challenges.
Sure.
But like I said, it's starting small, but also making a conscious decision that this is the life you want to live.
Right.
I believe happiness is a choice, and you don't just become happy overnight. You do things that can make you happy, or that bring happiness to other people, and that can lead to inspiration and motivation, and eventually it becomes a habit. It's a muscle.
Right.
And doing the right thing is a muscle. The more you exercise it, the more reps you'll be able to do, and the more natural it'll be able to come. I mean, it's always hard to wake up at 5 a.m. to get to the gym, but once you've done it for a few weeks or a few months, it's routine. Right. And I really think that I want to give credit to a lot of people out there who didn't take the route that I did, which is I took the route to, after 4 months of hiding what I do, to publicize it. But there's so many people out there that you would never know do acts of kindness. And there's a lot of good work that happens in the shadows. And having the ability to assess a situation, walk into a room and identify, oh, there's some positive change that can happen over here, or this person needs help, or this person can use a smile, or this seems wrong, let me fix it. That's a whole other skill that can be learned over time, developed over time. But there's people out there who are a lot more humble than I am, that do, like I said, do the work from the shadows. But once I got over the fact that I realized, you know what, I want to publicize this work, I think I can do more good by sharing. It kind of validated, once I got the positive feedback, it validated that it was the right thing to share my positive work. But there are going to be people that we walk by every day that you don't know that they've done incredible things. And
very true.
Those are the people that really support the world day to day. We can't forget them.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's where Baruch shines, by the way. I'm sorry, I do have to do this PSA, guys. Baruch is the kind of guy that if you're listening and if you're watching this show right now and you want to discover how awesome, I mean, we believe that everybody's awesome, and that goes without saying, exactly what Ari Sohn was saying, but sometimes it does require, digging deep and bringing that out of yourself, being able to walk into a room and making a difference and all that kind of stuff. That's what Baruch is. Baruch is all about being exceptional. So that's, you contact this guy.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
That is important. So I had to do that because Ari was just on the ball the whole time today, and and that's why they're connected. Do you guys make a difference now?
So I want to wrap up with that. Is that 3 years ago? What did we say? 3 years ago? 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was January 2020.
2020. Okay, so 2 years. Whatever, let's call it 3 years ago. January 2020. When I met Ari in January of 2020, I had no idea. I should say this as, when I met you, I had no idea. I don't know why I always speak in the third person. I had no idea where the relationship was going to go and where our connection was going to lead to. I just knew that you were a cool person to be connected to. And just by the way, that approach of where's grandma ended up flipping a switch in me as to how I marketed myself when I went to these events. I started, instead of writing my name, I started writing the Why Wizard, because at the time, my whole thing was helping people find their why. But I didn't want to be associated with like the Simon Sinek why. Like, oh, you're a Simon Sinek guy. No. Like, I use his stuff, but so I started going as the Why Wizard, and it had the same effect. People came over to me and just started the conversation. So again, I had no idea then where this connection was going to lead, but since then, you know, through following you, through watching your stuff, it has allowed me to have a deeper, better, better understanding and deeper appreciation for those who have deceased. And it has allowed me to open up to our family, you know, these graves that we wouldn't have known previously. That has brought to my attention the importance of when I go to visit those family members who have passed, knowing where they are, you know, and, you know, so you've worked on, what was it, 1,500, 15,000? I don't remember the number. 15,000 graves, but that has also spiraled into other people doing the same who maybe are doing it from the shadows. So again, the message that I want to leave off with everybody, to everybody, I can't think anymore. You never know where a connection is going to lead you. So just stay in contact, because I didn't know in 2020 that I was going to be having a live show with Yermi where, you know, we were going to be interviewing you. I didn't know that by meeting you when I went to Yermi, it was going to, like, you never know. So just for everybody, just stay open, be open to anything, stay connected. And then, you know, everything you said tonight, Ari, was so spot on. And there's so many layers there to unpack, and we'll put it up in the what do you call it? The recap. So again, just anybody, I encourage everybody to find Ari. LinkedIn, Instagram, you're big on. Facebook, I believe you're also on. We'll have all that contact info. It'll all be in the recap. Reach out to him. And the next time, if for any of our audience members, if you're visiting a cemetery to visit a family member or something, look for ways that you can beautify it. Again, the feeling I got from uncovering those, just ripping the grass up around those things and scrubbing it off a little bit, the feeling that I got, it was just like, because, you know, they can never say thank you.
That's right.
But it's this amazing, and again, it's kind of selfish, but it's the most selfish thing you could ever do. So I encourage you all to take the time, go out, visit. If you're able to, definitely follow Ari. Contribute however you can, and keep sharing the message of being the better person, being the greater person. Keep sharing the message of doing that kindness that you can't be repaid for.
Absolutely.
And again, Ari, thank you so much for being so creative with your marketing, which led to everything else, and to being an example and a role model to us all.
Thank you so much for having me, Baruch and Yermi. This has been really incredible. I always love every opportunity I have to share my passion for cemeteries, but what it encapsulates beyond that, which is protecting and preserving memories and dignity. So thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Thank you. And everybody, we will see you tomorrow in the Clubhouse, and next week again for the next show. This is super exciting, and we love having you guys here. So see you all next time. Thanks again for showing up today. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.